The knife clattered in the sink. I froze. Through the crack of my bedroom door, I heard my daughter-in-law's voice, low, sharp, and terrifying. Tomorrow night, while she's sleeping, it'll look like a stroke. My blood ran cold. A pause. Then my son replied, "Make sure she signs the new will before that." I backed away, nearly knocking over the chair. Had I just heard my only child plotting to kill me for my money? At 70 years old, in my own son's house, I realized something chilling. If I stayed until morning, I might not live to see the sun rise. So I ran. If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you, silently arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment saying Amen below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. It was 2:12 a.m. when I realized my life was in danger. I had been half asleep in my small room at the end of the hall, the one Michael and Samantha insisted was just perfect for me, a narrow guest room with no windows, wedged next to the laundry. The air was stuffy, and the fan made a low, tired buzz that masked most noises from the house. But that night, by some stroke of fate, I heard her voice. Samantha, on the phone, whispering. I couldn't make out every word, but enough of them cut through the walls like razors. It's all set for tomorrow night. Yeah, heart meds in the tea like we talked about. She won't even know. Just a nap that she doesn't wake up from. I froze. My body went cold, then hot, then cold again. I didn't breathe. My ears strained for every word. Her voice was sharp, calm, cruel. Michael's in. He'll be out at a bar all night, solid alibi. Once it's done, we get the paperwork filed. Trust reverts to the spouse. House is ours. No family to fight us. It's clean. She's old. It'll pass. Old. I sat up in bed, trembling. I reached for my purse where I kept my small notebook, my phone, and my original documents. Habit from a lifetime of order. Former teachers don't forget things like that. I didn't cry. Not then. There's a strange moment that happens when you realize someone wants you gone, not just ignored or pushed aside, but dead. Some part of you detaches, becomes surgical, focused. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I slipped on the old walking shoes I kept beside the bed. I pulled a light sweater over my nightgown and grabbed my purse. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I just knew I had to leave. The back door creaked softly. I didn't dare turn on the porch light. I stepped out into the muggy August night, the smell of wet pavement in the air from earlier rain. The cicadas hummed in the distance like ghosts. My heart pounded as I walked past the rose bushes I had trimmed just days ago, the same bushes Samantha scowled at when I asked her to water them. I walked for blocks, down side streets, past closed diners, gas stations, and shuttered storefronts. I was a 70-year-old woman in slippers and a nightgown, clutching a purse like a lifeline. But I didn't care. I was alive. I was making a choice, the first real choice I had made in 5 years. I called a cab. When the driver pulled up and saw me, he blinked like he wasn't sure if I was a ghost. I gave him the name of the fanciest hotel I could think of, the Peninsula, Chicago, and pulled a credit card from my purse. One Michael had no idea I had. A lifetime of quiet savings, smart investments, and a husband who taught me to always keep a way out, just in case. I checked into the hotel at 3 a.m. The front desk clerk looked at me with polite confusion, but he didn't argue. My card cleared without issue. Presidential suite, I said, with a calm I didn't feel. By 3:30, I was standing in a room bigger than their entire house, staring out at the dark city below. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to truly sit without tension. I poured myself water from a glass pitcher. I pulled back the curtains and watched the lights flicker from Michigan Avenue. My phone buzzed at 1 a.m. Michael. Then Samantha. Then Michael again. Missed calls. Voicemails. I didn't answer. Instead, I ordered breakfast. Eggs Benedict, fresh berries, coffee real Colombian, not the bitter powder Samantha bought in bulk. I sat on the balcony wrapped in a hotel robe, eating as if I hadn't tasted anything in years. And maybe I hadn't, not really. They thought I would be gone by now. They thought I would be dead. But I wasn't. I was here, awake, free, and they had made the worst mistake of their lives. They underestimated the wrong woman. By 7 a.m., I had made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to my bank. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes," the voice said cheerfully after I passed the security questions. "How can I assist you?" "I need a full summary of all liquid assets, including dividends from the past 6 months." Oh, I had never said those words aloud before, but I said them now calmly, as if I'd been doing it all my life. The number they gave me made me go still. Decades of saving. Smart, patient investing. The condo I sold to move in with Michael and Samantha. I never used that money. It had tripled in value thanks to a market I quietly studied at night while they watched television and ignored me in the living room. I wasn't just not poor, I was comfortably wealthy, and they had no idea. The second call I made was to Thomas Reed, the attorney who handled my husband's will after he passed. "Eleanor?" His voice crackled through the line, warm and surprised. "Good heavens, it's been years." "Thomas," I said, my voice steady, "I need your help. It's urgent and complicated. I'll clear my afternoon." The third call was to Paula Jenkins, my old friend and realtor. We hadn't spoken in years, not since I moved into Michael's house. "Paula," I said when she picked up, "do you remember that penthouse you showed me once? The one I said I'd only consider if I ever needed to be independent again?" "The one in Gold Coast?" she asked, surprised. "With the lake view and the built-in fireplace?" "That's the one," I said. "I want to see it today." There was a silence. "Eleanor? Are you all right?" I looked out over the skyline from my suite. "No, Paula," I said quietly, "but I'm about to be." The hours passed in a daze of movement and decision-making. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't someone's burden or a background figure in someone else's home. I was Eleanor Hayes, a woman with options. At the hotel spa, a young stylist named Brianna eyed me curiously. "Any special occasion, ma'am?" I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was worn, my hair limp, but beneath all that was someone I hadn't seen in years. "It's the first day of the rest of my life," I said. She smiled. "Then let's make it count." 3 hours later, I barely recognized the woman staring back. My silver hair was cut in a sleek bob. My face, no longer dull with exhaustion, looked like it belonged to someone who mattered, someone who knew her worth. While I waited for my meeting with Thomas, I thought about those 5 years with Michael and Samantha. It hadn't started badly. After my husband died, Michael came to my little condo in tears. "You shouldn't be alone, Mom," he said, holding my hand. "We're your family. Come live with us." I had been so touched. I sold the condo. I packed away a life's worth of things. I gave up my independence because I thought I was gaining love, connection. In the beginning, Samantha smiled at me. She let me help with dinner, asked about my day. Michael would thank me for folding his laundry or making his favorite soup. I thought I was building a home again, but slowly, it began to change. Samantha's smiles faded first. "Maybe let me handle the kitchen, Eleanor," she said one day too sweetly. "You're always so tired lately." Michael began backing her up. "Mom, you don't have to do so much. Rest. Take care of yourself." Rest became the excuse for everything. Rest when they had guests. Rest when they didn't want me at dinner. Rest when they didn't want me to speak. One day, Samantha told me I should stay in my room during their anniversary party. "The place gets crowded," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. "It'll just be more comfortable for you." I stayed upstairs that night, listening to laughter and music I wasn't invited to join. The food changed too. Slowly, my portions shrank. Meals were served after I'd already eaten toast. When I asked about dinner, Samantha would say, "Oh, sorry, I thought you'd already eaten." The worst part wasn't what they did, it was how I let it happen. I convinced myself it was just a rough patch, that maybe I was old and slow, that maybe asking for company or dinner or a kind word was too much. That's what they do to you. They chip away at your worth until you think you're lucky just to be tolerated. At 4 p.m., I entered Thomas Reed's office in the Loop, wearing my new pearl gray suit. He stood up, startled. "Eleanor, you look like someone who's done being silenced." I told him everything. The overheard phone call, the poisoned tea, the fake concern, the years of subtle, creeping control. Thomas took notes furiously. "This is more than abuse," he said, frowning. "It's attempted murder, and if we can tie it to financial motive..." "They think I don't know what I own," I said. "Do they know the house they live in isn't theirs?" "Number, my husband placed it in a trust. They can live there while I'm alive, and only with my consent." Thomas smiled grimly. "Then we have a powerful legal position. What are my options? Criminal charges, restraining orders, civil suits." "But Eleanor," he said, leaning forward, "I have a different idea. I'm listening. Let's make this unforgettable. Not just legally, publicly. You deserve more than justice. You deserve vindication. And..." I didn't hesitate. "I'm ready." That evening, I stood once more on the balcony of the peninsula, a glass of red wine in hand. The city lights stretched before me like a promise. Below, traffic moved, and people rushed through lives that didn't know not yet that a 70-year-old woman had just declared war. My phone buzzed again. "Michael." Voicemail. "Mom, please call us. We're really worried. Samantha is having panic attacks. We just want to make sure you're safe." Safe. I stared at the screen, then deleted the message. They had 5 years to care about my safety. Now it was my turn to care about my future. I moved into the penthouse on a Thursday morning. The sun had barely risen when the movers arrived to retrieve my things from the hotel, a modest suitcase, my file folders, and the old leather purse that had held my lifeline that night. Funny how little I had taken with me. It turned out, when you've lived for others long enough, you stop collecting things for yourself. The new place was more than I ever thought I'd live, in a quiet corner unit perched above Lakeshore Drive, floor-to-ceiling windows, a fireplace with white marble trim, the kind of place you see in magazines, not in the retirement brochures Samantha used to leave on the kitchen counter by accident. I stood on the balcony, letting the wind from Lake Michigan tousle my new haircut. I was still getting used to the reflection that met me in the mirror each morning, still learning to trust the strength I saw there. Paula came by that afternoon with a bottle of wine and her usual sharp tongue. "If this is what revenge looks like," she said, looking around the apartment, "I'd say you're doing it in style." We laughed, but beneath the laughter there was steel. "I want this to be more than escape," I said. "I want it to mean something." She sat beside me on the terrace. "It already does. But if you're ready for the next step, I've got an idea." Paula had connections. She always had. In another life, she could have been a politician. She helped organize a private real estate event at the Drake Hotel, an upscale gathering where investors could meet developers, view luxury properties, and shake hands over champagne. "We'll put you on the guest list as a key investor," she grinned. "Then I'll arrange a little surprise. Just make sure you wear something that says, 'I'm not the victim you thought I was.'" I can handle that," I said, already picturing the look on Samantha's face when she realized what I'd become. Meanwhile, Thomas was digging. "Do you want the good news or the ugly news?" he asked over the phone the next morning. "Let's rip off the Band-Aid. They've been lying about your condition for years," he said. "I've already found a blog, Caring for Eleanor, written under Samantha's name, but with your photo on the banner. She writes about caring for a declining elderly relative suffering early-stage dementia." I closed my eyes. Of course she did. "There's more," Thomas continued. "The blog is monetized. Ads, affiliate links, even a donation link for Margaret's medical care. Do we know how much? Just under 10,000. But that's not the worst part. They've filed for tax deductions using medical receipts under your name." My blood froze. "Fake medical records?" "I'm still verifying. but it looks that way. I gripped the edge of the counter. I want them held accountable, Thomas, all of it. You will, he said, but we'll need proof and patience. Oh, patience, that old friend. That night, my phone rang again. Michael. I let it ring twice before answering. I was ready this time. Mom? He sounded out of breath, surprised I had picked up. Thank God. Are you okay? I'm fine, Michael. Where are you? In the city. Safe. Not that it was your concern. He went quiet. Samantha's beside herself, he said. We've been calling hospitals, police. She hasn't slept. How strange, I said lightly. Neither have I. Something about learning your own child wants you dead tends to disrupt your sleep cycle. His voice cracked. Mom, no, you misunderstood. That wasn't. Careful, Michael, I said, my voice low. Lie to me, and this conversation ends here. Another long pause. I didn't want any of this, he said finally. It was Samantha's idea. She said it was the only way, that we were drowning in debt, that you'd never notice. So quick to throw her under the bus. She said we could get the house, maybe some insurance, and just move on. I didn't think she'd go through with it. I didn't think you'd hear. You knew, I said. You knew, and you stayed silent. That makes you guilty, Michael. Not confused. Guilty. He didn't deny it. Mom, he whispered, please, come home. Let's talk. We'll figure this out. I will never step foot in that house again. Then what do you want? He asked, and there was no emotion left in his voice, only fatigue. Resentment. I want you to know that I'm not the woman you thought I was, I said, and I want you to feel what it's like to lose control, to be powerless, to live in fear of what happens next. He hung up without another word. I stared at the screen. He used to be a little boy who cried when he scraped his knees, who made me cards on Mother's Day, who stood beside me at his father's funeral with trembling hands. Now, he was a man willing to watch his mother die for a deed and a down payment. The days passed quickly. I went over contracts with Thomas, signed leases, reviewed legal strategies, bought new clothes tailored, elegant, unapologetically bold. Ethan Morales, a journalist Thomas had worked with before, agreed to join our team. I've seen a lot of elder abuse, he said, but rarely this orchestrated. If we can prove attempted murder tied to financial gain. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Samantha and Michael hadn't just tried to erase me. They had done it for money, and soon the world would know. The envelope was thick, luxurious, and embossed with gold. It looked like something from a private club, the kind of invitation that made people stand taller just by holding it. Inside it read, Premier Horizon Group cordially invites Mr. and Mrs. Michael Hayes to an exclusive luxury investment event at the Drake Hotel Ballroom. Experience a curated showcase of high-net-worth real estate opportunities, early access investment previews, and elite financial networking. Thursday, the 12th of September, 7 p.m. Formal attire required. Paula placed it into the mailbox of the house on West Berenice Avenue herself, with a smirk that said, "This is going to be fun." They won't resist, she told me later over coffee in my penthouse. Samantha lives for this kind of thing, money, status, pretending to be someone she's not. Let them pretend, I said, because by the end of that night, the masks come off. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would lure them in not with threats or confrontation, but with the very thing they craved most: power, prestige, access. They would arrive expecting to network with real estate moguls and potential partners. What they'd walk into, instead, was the unmasking of their crimes in front of an audience they desperately wanted to impress. But to pull it off, everything had to be perfect. I started with myself. I needed to become the woman they had convinced themselves didn't exist, a woman too old, too frail, too slow to matter. I wanted them to look at me and feel, for the first time, what I had felt for 5 years: small, unseen, unimportant. Only now, they'd feel it under the weight of their own shame. Paula took me shopping the next day. Not to a department store, to a private studio appointment at one of Chicago's high-end fashion houses, the kind where nothing is on a rack and champagne is served before measurements are even taken. "This one," she said, running her fingers along a deep emerald green suit. "Strong color, tailored to kill. Add pearls, and you'll look like the godmother of their worst nightmare." I smiled. Exactly the look I'm going for. Brianna, my now regular stylist, met me later that afternoon. We went with a soft blowout, framed just below the jawline, and makeup that accentuated what mattered: the sharpness of my eyes, the calm set of my mouth. "You look like someone who's about to fire a CEO, she said when we were done. "Close," I replied, "just exposing 2 con artists who thought they could bury me." Thomas and Ethan worked behind the scenes, gathering the final documentation for the night. Screenshots of blog entries Samantha had tried to delete. Audio files, including the voicemail where she whispered to someone, "It'll look like natural causes. She's on medication already." Copies of the falsified tax documents, loan applications, and even an attempted insurance increase. "She forged your signature," Thomas told me, laying out the files on my coffee table. "Tried to double your life policy. It was denied. But the fact she tried, that's intent. What's the next step?" "We'll file formal charges once the public exposure is done. I want them reeling, and I want you protected." He handed me a document. "Emergency restraining order. Signed by the judge this morning. Effective immediately." It felt heavier than paper. It felt like armor. The following morning, I met Detective Aaron Blake again. He had reviewed the evidence we submitted, and this time, his tone was different, firmer, more urgent. "This is serious," he said, after I recounted everything from the overheard call to the forged doctor's notes. "Do you believe they intended to kill you?" "Yes," I said without flinching. "They planned it down to the timeline. They had the motive, the means, and the cover story. They didn't think I'd survive long enough to say anything." He nodded. "We'll be opening a formal investigation. If what your attorney says is true, we're not just talking about elder abuse. This is conspiracy to commit murder." "They need to be stopped," I said. "Not just for me, but for anyone they might try this with again." He handed me a card. "You have my number directly now. You see them near you. You call. Day or night." "Thank you, Detective." And freeing. As I stood to leave, he looked at me with quiet respect. "Most people in your position wouldn't have the strength to do what you're doing." "Most people in my position never get the chance," I replied. "But I do, and I won't waste it." The days leading up to the event passed in a blur of preparation. I rehearsed my speech not word for word, but the rhythm of it. I didn't want a script. I wanted honesty. Cold, hard, devastating honesty. Ethan installed discreet cameras in the ballroom. "Nothing invasive," he said, "but we'll have clean footage, clean audio. If they try to deny what happens, we'll have receipts." I approved the guest list, double-checked the logistics, and confirmed that Samantha and Michael had RSVP'd. "Yes, 2 guests," Paula said, raising an eyebrow. They clicked "will attend" 10 minutes after the invitation arrived. Probably spent the last week trying to Google Premier Horizon Group. "Let them dig," I said. "They won't find anything until the only thing left to discover is the truth." On the day of the event, I stood in front of the floor-length mirror in my bedroom, fastening the final pearl earring. My reflection looked back at me, not the woman who escaped through the back door of a house 5 weeks ago, trembling in her nightgown, but a woman reborn, grounded, unafraid. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew this. Tonight, they would finally see me, and they would never forget it. The ballroom at the Drake Hotel glowed with opulence. Golden chandeliers shimmered above linen-covered tables. Waiters in crisp black suits weaved through the room with silver trays, offering champagne flutes and crab-stuffed hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played near the front, their notes elegant and understated. The room buzzed with polite conversation developers, investors, real estate agents, and socialites mingling over property brochures printed on thick paper. And then, they arrived. I saw them before they saw me. Michael's suit was wrinkled at the sleeves. He looked uncomfortable, tugging at his collar, the way he always did when he knew he was somewhere he didn't belong. Samantha, by contrast, was radiant, or trying to be. Her red dress hugged too tightly, her heels too tall, her smile too wide. She scanned the room like she was already imagining her place in it, as if she were already on the inside. They didn't recognize anyone. But they pretended to belong. That was always Samantha's talent, faking it with confidence. They took 2 glasses of champagne and positioned themselves near the back, nodding graciously at strangers, waiting for someone important to approach them. They had no idea the most important person in the room was standing behind the curtain, waiting to ruin their night. Paula took the stage first. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice ringing out clear and professional. "Thank you for joining us for tonight's exclusive investment showcase. We're thrilled to have such a distinguished group gathered here." She smiled, then continued. "Before we begin, we have a special introduction. Tonight's keynote speaker is not only a seasoned investor, but a woman of extraordinary resilience and wisdom. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Eleanor Hayes." "I do." Applause broke out across the room, and then silence, because they saw me. Emerald suit, pearls, perfect posture, calm, composed, and nothing like the invisible old woman they'd shoved into a side room for 5 years. Samantha dropped her champagne flute. It shattered softly against the carpet. Michael's mouth opened, then closed again like a stunned fish. I walked slowly, deliberately, to the podium. My heels clicked with precision. My heart was steady. "Good evening," I said. "Thank you for being here." I let the pause stretch. I wanted them to feel every second of it. "I wasn't always someone who belonged in a room like this," I began. "For most of my life, I was a teacher. I raised a child. I paid my bills, paid my taxes, and built my retirement slowly, quietly over decades." I looked toward Michael and Samantha. "For the last 5 years, I lived with my son and his wife. I thought I was part of a family. I thought I was safe." Another pause. And then I overheard a phone call, one I wasn't meant to hear. In it, my daughter-in-law described how she would poison me. My son, she said, would be out establishing an alibi. It would look natural. They'd get the house, the insurance, the sympathy. Murmurs spread across the ballroom. Guests turned their heads toward Michael and Samantha. Michael stood frozen. Samantha took a step backward, her face pale now beneath her makeup. "I left that night," I said, "with nothing but a purse and a purpose. I survived because I listened, because I paid attention, because I refused to be what they expected, helpless, silent, disposable." A few guests clapped. Others just stared in disbelief. I tell you this not for pity. I don't need pity. I tell you this because elder abuse does not always look like bruises or shouting matches. Sometimes, it looks like fake smiles, like missed dinners, like whispered conversations behind closed doors. I gestured to the projection screen behind me. Images appeared, screenshots of Samantha's blog, Caring for Eleanor, complete with fabricated journal entries and donation links. She documented fake episodes of my dementia to gain sympathy online, I said. She wrote about me forgetting my own name, about hallucinations, about being dangerous. More images, a forged doctor's letter, tax documents claiming elder care expenses, applications for loans. They used my name to obtain tax benefits, financial assistance, and business loans. They filed for increased life insurance coverage in April, without my consent, with a forged signature. Now, audible gasps. Several people had their phones out, recording. "I have here a full legal report," I continued, holding up a folder, prepared by my attorney, detailing the extent of the fraud. "A criminal case has been opened. Evidence has been submitted. Charges are forthcoming." I stepped back from the microphone. "And tonight, this room is my witness." The applause started slowly, uncertainly, then built into a swell. I turned toward the back. Samantha looked like she was about to faint. Her face was ashen. Her hands trembled. "Michael," He didn't even look at me. He stared at the floor. For the first time, perhaps ever, he had nothing to say. The rest of the evening was a blur. People approached me with tears in their eyes. Elderly guests hugged me. Real estate developers shook my hand. Lawyers offered support. Journalists requested interviews. Strangers thanked me. But I had eyes only for the two people who used to share my dinner table and plotted my death over it. I watched as they slipped toward the exit, trying not to draw attention. But the attention followed them. Whispers, judgment, disgust. They left with their heads down, like criminals caught on camera, because they had been. And I wasn't done yet. The morning after the event at the Drake, I woke up to a different world. My phone was vibrating off the nightstand with dozens, no, hundreds of notifications. I blinked against the morning light, slipped on my robe, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. The smell of freshly ground coffee, the view of Lake Michigan stretching like a dream out my window. It was a strange, peaceful contrast to the digital storm swirling just beneath my fingertips. My inbox was overflowing. Subject, urgent media request. Subject, we saw your story. Please, let us help. Subject, my mother went through the same thing. Thank you for speaking up. The video had gone viral. Ethan had uploaded the footage shortly after the event, just as we'd planned. But neither of us expected it to spread like wildfire. By 6 a.m., the clip of me on stage telling my story with calm clarity while Samantha dropped her champagne flute had been shared across every major social media platform. 15,000 shares by breakfast. 50,000 by noon. By the time the evening news ran a full segment on it, Chicago grandmother outsmarts greedy family in stunning public showdown, the views had passed 3 million. But it wasn't the views that moved me. It was the comments. I watched this with my mom. We cried together. My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 2 years. I thought I was alone. Thank you. My sister and I are taking care of our dad. This reminded us to make sure we're really caring, not just managing. Some were heartbreaking. My grandmother died in a nursing home she didn't choose. I always suspected it wasn't what she wanted. I wish I'd known more. I wish I'd spoken up. Heh. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, reading for hours, hand over my heart. The pain I had carried alone for years wasn't mine alone. And now, it was seen. That afternoon, Nora Caldwell called. She was the anchor of the most watched morning show in America, and now, she wanted me in her chair. Eleanor, she said with a calm, graceful voice, your story has touched a nerve across the country. We want to give you a platform to speak not just as a survivor, but as a leader. I'm not sure I'm either, I admitted. You are now. We filmed the interview 2 days later in my penthouse, just as I wanted. The studio sent a camera crew, lighting, makeup, everything. But they let me sit in my own chair, pour my own tea, wear my own clothes. I wore navy and silver. I spoke without notes. And this time, I told everything, from the first warning signs, to the cruelty masked as care, to the night I walked into the darkness with only a purse and a prayer. I told them about the tea that would have been laced, about the fake blog posts, about the moment I stood on stage and took my life back. I think what hurts most, I told Nora, is that I wanted to believe they loved me. I wanted to believe I mattered. But I mattered only when I was convenient. And when I wasn't, they were ready to bury me. She blinked, visibly moved. What would you say to other seniors watching this, Eleanor? I looked into the camera. I'd say, don't wait for someone to save you. Save yourself. You're not weak. You're not invisible. You have value and the right to live without fear. The clip aired the next morning. By noon, donations were flooding in not for me, but for what we had quietly launched behind the scenes, the Eleanor Hayes Foundation, dedicated to protecting the rights, finances, and dignity of seniors nationwide. Thomas had the paperwork ready within days. Paula reached out to her network of donors and attorneys. Ethan wrote a series of exposés for a national news outlet. What started as survival was becoming something bigger. It was becoming justice. Meanwhile, Michael and Samantha were spiraling. Their names and faces were now known coast to coast. Internet sleuths had found their social media accounts. their employer info, even reviews from people who'd met them through community groups. The sympathy they once faked was nowhere to be found. Samantha, in desperation, released a video on Instagram. Tear-streaked, cropped too close, shaking hands. "Please, you don't understand," she said. "I loved Margaret Eleanor. I only ever tried to help her. We were struggling. We made mistakes, but we never meant to hurt anyone." The comments were savage. So lying about her having dementia was love? You tried to kill her. Delete your account and go to jail. Michael tried a different approach, silence. But silence wasn't going to save him anymore, especially not when the subpoenas started arriving. Thomas filed the first round of legal actions that week. Criminal charges for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. Civil suits for defamation, financial abuse, and identity theft. Requests for full audits of all loans and tax documents filed in Eleanor Hayes's name over the past 5 years. Detective Blake confirmed the CPD was moving forward with prosecution. Samantha's forged doctor's letter was the tipping point. But the real nail in the coffin? A voice recording. One Samantha didn't know was captured. Get her to drink the tea. That's all you have to do, 1 glass, then we're free. We had the original audio, we had the metadata, and we had the motive. Now, we had momentum. That night, I sat alone on my terrace. The city hummed below me. People going about their lives, unaware that on the 23rd floor of a Gold Coast building, a 70-year-old woman had just taken back everything that mattered. Not just safety, but truth, and dignity, and power. I didn't toast with wine that night. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote just 2 lines. They tried to end me. Instead, I began again. The knock on the door wasn't loud. It was soft, hesitant, like whoever stood behind it already knew they shouldn't be there. I looked through the peephole and wasn't surprised. Michael, standing alone in the hallway of my building, no security pass, no appointment, just the slouched shoulders of a man who had run out of places to hide. He wore a windbreaker I hadn't seen since he was in college. It hung off him now like a memory that didn't fit anymore. I considered not opening the door, but I did, because I needed to see him one more time, not for closure, but for confirmation. That I wasn't wrong to walk away, that I wasn't cruel for choosing myself. I cracked the door. "You have 5 minutes. "Mom, please," he said, voice thick. "I didn't know where else to go. You should have gone to the lawyer I paid to defend you against charges you earned." He flinched. "Can I come in?" "Number, this is my home, and you gave up the right to enter it the night you decided my death was more useful than my life." He stood there, staring at the floor. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." "No," I said coldly. "It was supposed to happen quietly, neatly. 1 cup of poisoned tea and you'd inherit the rest." "Don't say that." "Why? Because it's true?" He lifted his head. His eyes were red, but not from tears. From lack of sleep. From panic. She said it was just talk at first, that we'd never actually do it. She said if we looked into insurance options, it didn't mean anything. I laughed not because it was funny, but because the audacity was so staggering. "Michael," I said softly, "do you realize what you're doing right now? You're trying to rewrite your own actions in real time. You're trying to be the victim of your wife's ambition, as if you weren't there, as if you didn't nod, as if your silence wasn't complicity." He looked away. I pressed on. "You could have stopped her. You could have told me. You could have walked away. You did none of those things, because deep down you agreed. You wanted it done. You just didn't want the mess." He sank onto the bench outside my door. "I lost everything," he whispered. "My job, my reputation. Sam left. She's blaming me for everything. Said I was the one who pushed her into it. She said the same about you." He looked up. "I've heard from both of you now. She sent me an email begging me to clarify the misunderstanding in public. Said she was influenced. Said you twisted the idea into something darker. You know what that tells me?" He didn't answer. "That neither of you are capable of remorse. Only damage control." He leaned forward, burying his face in his hands. I just want a chance to start over." "So did I said. "But you wanted to start over without me in the picture." A long silence stretched between us. I watched my son, the boy I once rocked to sleep, who brought me macaroni necklaces and Mother's Day cards made with crayon, reduced now to a man unraveling in the hallway of a building he'd never dreamed I could afford. He wasn't crying. He was ashamed. And still, it wasn't enough. "Michael," I said quietly, "you didn't just hurt me. You taught me something I never wanted to learn, that love isn't always enough, that blood doesn't always mean loyalty." He looked up, eyes pleading. "I can't undo what you did, and I can't forget it, but I've forgiven you." He blinked. "Forgiveness," I said slowly, "is not the same as permission. It's not the same as reconciliation. It means I won't let your betrayal rot in me like it once did. But it doesn't mean you get to be part of my life again." "I don't want money," he said. "I'm not here for anything." "I know. You're here because you lost everything you thought made you important, and now you're looking at the one thing you discarded, hoping I'll still be soft." His face crumpled. "I'm not soft anymore." I closed the door gently, without slamming it. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to rage. I had said what needed to be said. Behind the locked door, I leaned against the wood and exhaled. That was the last time I saw my son. A week later, Thomas called to tell me that Samantha had attempted to sell her story to a cable network. "She's framing it as a cautionary tale about internet backlash and media manipulation," he said dryly. "They bought it?" "Number." "They passed after our team submitted the public records, and after seeing the footage." "What footage?" He hesitated. "I didn't want to worry you, but there's more video from that night." Ethan captured Samantha saying something very specific when she dropped her glass. He played the audio over the phone. Her voice frantic, sharp, barely audible under the music. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be dead. My blood ran cold again, not from fear, but from clarity. This was never paranoia. This was real, and it had almost worked. But I was still standing. That night, I wrote in my journal again. Not out of pain, but out of peace. You can survive betrayal. You can even survive the absence of love, but only if you love yourself more than they hate your independence. I slept soundly for the first time in months. Not because I'd won, but because I'd walked away whole. The first office of the Eleanor Hayes Foundation was nothing fancy, just 2 rooms above a bakery in Lincoln Park, with slanted ceilings, worn hardwood floors, and the smell of cinnamon rolls wafting in every morning. The space came cheap. The building owner had seen my interview and offered the lease at half price. "I watched what you said on television," she told me over the phone. "My grandmother went through something similar. We didn't realize it until it was too late. If I can help someone else avoid that, I will." It was the first of many such messages. People didn't just want to thank me, they wanted to join me. By the time the paint dried on the sign above the door, I already had 3 retired attorneys offering pro bono work, a financial advisor with 2 decades of experience in estate planning, volunteering 1 day a week, a social worker named Janet, who had spent 15 years handling elder neglect cases and who cried when she shook my hand. "I didn't think anyone cared enough to start something like this," she said, "let alone someone who lived through it." We began with modest goals, a hotline for seniors to call if they felt unsafe, unheard, or confused about their rights, a workshop series on financial literacy, especially how to protect assets, trusts, and medical power of attorney, a weekly gathering at a local community center where older adults could simply sit, talk, drink tea, and remember they mattered. But within weeks it grew. Stories poured in from all over the country. My niece took over my checking account and won't give it back. My daughter says I'm forgetful and tried to change my will without telling me. My grandson moved in and now I can't get him out. He threatens me when I ask him to leave. They weren't all life-threatening, but they all had one thing in common: people being treated like property, people being told their worth had expired the moment their usefulness faded. And now, someone was listening. The press came again, this time not for scandal, but for hope. Chicago Grandmother Opens Foundation after public battle with family abuse. The headline read, "From betrayed to bold, Eleanor Hayes helps other seniors take back their power." I hated the word grandmother. I never had grandchildren, but I understood why they used it. It softened me. It made what I was doing feel safe. What they didn't understand was that this wasn't about softness. It was about justice. One day, about a month after we opened, a woman walked into the office without an appointment. Her name was Lillian. She wore a long tan coat and a hat too big for her head. She clutched a canvas tote like it held the secrets of her entire life. "I don't know if this is the right place," she said nervously. I saw the story, and I've been sitting on the bus stop for 20 minutes, trying to decide if I should come up." "Come in," I said, guiding her to the worn floral couch we'd picked up from a donation center. She sat down slowly, adjusting her coat. "My son's trying to get me to sign over the deed," she said quietly. "He says it's for refinancing, but he gets angry if I ask questions." I nodded, listening. "He says I'm paranoid, that I should trust him. But when I asked for the paperwork, he said I didn't need to see it." Her voice cracked. "I don't want to believe he's lying, but something doesn't feel right." I reached out and took her hand. "You don't have to believe it yet," I said. "You just have to believe yourself, that what you're feeling is worth listening to." She broke down, and right there, in that little second-floor office, we saved a house and a woman's dignity. That same week, our legal team helped stop a fraudulent guardianship order in Michigan. Our financial advisor spoke on local radio about spotting elder scams, and Paula, now our part-time operations director, was organizing our first official fundraiser. "I want to rent a museum," she said over lunch. "Something beautiful. Classy but not snobby. Something that makes seniors feel powerful." I smiled. "Just don't put my face on another banner." "No promises," she winked. "You're our brand now, sweetheart." Despite everything we were building, there were moments when the pain tried to creep back in, especially at night. Sometimes, I'd dream of Michael as a boy again. His messy hair, his gap-toothed grin, the way he used to squeeze my hand 3 times at bedtime. "I love you. I love you. I love you." And then I'd wake up to silence. I didn't hate him, but I couldn't miss the version of him that never really existed. One evening, I pulled out a photograph, the last one we took together, before everything unraveled. We were in the backyard. Samantha had made lemonade. Michael had grilled burgers. I was smiling, but it didn't reach my eyes. Even then, I think I knew. I placed the photo in a drawer, and I let it go. On the Foundation's 3-month anniversary, we threw a gathering for our community members. There were balloons, cookies, a slideshow of seniors from around the country who'd written to us, faces beaming, proud, seen. When it was my turn to speak, I stood in front of a room full of people who'd once believed they were alone. "I used to think my voice didn't matter," I told them. "That if I just stayed quiet, stayed out of the way, people would love me more. But silence doesn't buy you love. It only buys you more silence." I paused, scanning the crowd. I thought the worst thing in the world was being a burden, but it turns out the worst thing is letting someone convince you that you are. Heads nodded. Some wiped their eyes. I smiled gently. "We are not burdens. We are bridges. We are the ones who built everything. It's time we remembered that and made sure the world never forgets it again." Applause erupted. Not polite, not rehearsed, but real. And I knew then, without question, I was exactly where I was meant to be. The morning light shone through the tall windows of the courthouse in Chicago. I stood in a dark navy dress, simple, respectful but powerful. My heart thudded against my ribs, not from fear, but from resolve. Today the halls of justice would echo with what I had been whispering in pain for 5 years. Thomas Reed sat next to me at counsel's table, his face calm, arms folded over large files. Ethan Morales was present with his notebook, ready to record every moment. Paula Jenkins, who had stood by my side through every twist, leaned against the back wall, her expression taut with anticipation. We waited for Judge Simone Ramirez to enter. She wore a robe of black, her presence composed, authority silent but real. The room hushed. Lawyers for the plaintiffs, me, and the defense for Michael and Samantha filed in. Michael's attorney looked exhausted. Samantha's tried to stand tall, to hold herself together. "Let the record show," the court clerk said. "Case number 1, 9 CR 4521, State of Illinois versus Michael Hayes and Samantha Hayes. Defendant's plea, not guilty." I felt a tightening in my chest, not from nerves, but from all the injustice I was about to speak aloud. Michael's attorney rose first, calling Michael Hayes to the stand. He swore Michael in. The defense began with denials and soft tones. Michael had been manipulated by Samantha. He believed in her lies. He didn't know of the poisoning plan. All of it a misunderstanding. A tragic misunderstanding. He thought he was doing right by his mother, his lawyer insisted. Samantha's side followed. They painted her as a devoted wife, trying to care for me in old age, that I had health issues, that the blog posts were attempts, poorly executed, to document genuine concern. They claimed ignorance regarding the more malicious schemes: poison tea, forged documents, attempts to increase life insurance, falsified medical records. Each claim felt like a slap. Then came my turn. Thomas stood. "Your Honor, members of the jury, I'd like Eleanor Hayes to present her testimony." I stood, smoothing my navy suit jacket. The courtroom smelled of oak, leather, polished wood. The air felt heavy. I cleared my throat. "My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 70 years old. I have lived most of my life caring for others, teaching, loving. But for the past 5 years, I lived a lie inside my own home." How? I recalled the first time Samantha said I should rest, because cleaning took too long. I recalled when Michael would argue I looked tired when guests came over. When I heard Samantha arranging for me to drink tea laced with something not for comfort, but for ending. I recounted the hearing in the guest room, the cramped one with no windows where I overheard the plan. The recordings, the audio files that Samantha thought she had deleted. The financial documents Thomas had uncovered. The life insurance forms with my name, forged. The tax filings stealing credit. Deductions for care I never received. I kept my voice steady, not loud, firm. I looked at the jury, then Michael, then Samantha. Not once did either of you ask if I wanted any of that. Not once did you treat me like someone with rights. Instead, you treated me like something to be disposed of. My hands trembled for a moment. I won't lie, but I forced them still, because this wasn't about shame. It was about justice, delivering the evidence. Thomas played the voicemail recording. Samantha's voice, calm and cruel. "We all agree just one drink. She won't know." The trust reverts to me. The screenshot of the fake doctor's note. The forged signature. The blog entries. One entry in particular. Eleanor forgot our address. She accused me of hiding her pills again. I was in Florida that day, closing on that penthouse. Thomas presented travel records and receipts. The tax records. The loans. Insurance applications. The attempt to change my life insurance beneficiary form. And the final punch. Detective Aaron Blake testified about Samantha's own admission. In that recorded audio. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be dead. Each piece snapped together like broken glass, forming a picture too cold to ignore. Cross-examination. Samantha's attorney tried to cast doubt. Isn't it possible she misread things? Maybe the blog was for caring, not malice? Michael's side asked whether I had shared these concerns earlier, or if I sought medical evaluation myself, trying to imply exaggeration. I answered each quietly, with what truth I had gathered. Yes, I should have spoken earlier. Fear kept me silent. Shame kept me believing maybe I was overreacting. No, I have no cognitive issues. I passed memory tests. A doctor I visited under my own name. The jury watched. Some jurors scribbled notes. Some looked at Michael and Samantha with new light in their eyes. shock, betrayal, sorrow. Closing arguments. Thomas stood tall, voice carrying. Members of the jury, you've heard the recordings, seen the documents, witnessed the deceit. This is not a misunderstanding. This is an attempted murder plotting, financial fraud, elder abuse. Justice demands more than sympathy, it demands accountability. Then Samantha's attorney. Yes, she made mistakes. Yes, there were bad decisions, but no one intended murder. My client never asked that Eleanor die. She asked for help. Emser. And Michael's attorney repeated the mistakes. He was manipulated. He does love his mother. But Samantha took control. Verdict. We waited for hours in a small courtroom. The jury's faces were unreadable as they filed back. I had memories of waiting in classrooms, waiting for report cards, waiting for my husband's eyes to tell me something was wrong. But this was different. Judge Ramirez read the verdict. Guilty on charges of conspiracy to commit murder for Samantha Hayes. Guilty of financial fraud and elder abuse for Samantha Hayes. Guilty of aiding and abetting conspiracy for Michael Hayes. There was a moment, just a moment, when Samantha's face lost all color. Michael's head dropped into his hands. The bailiff called for order. Judge Ramirez's voice echoed. Sentencing will take place in 30 days. Damages awarded will include full restitution for Mrs. Hayes for all financial losses, physical and emotional harm, plus punitive damages to deter this kind of predation. Aftermath in court. As the courtroom emptied, people came up. Neighbors, aging couples, journalists, reporters with notebooks, cameras flashing. One woman hugged me so tight I thought she might break. Thank you for speaking, she said. I thought I was alone. I nodded, tears in my eyes. I wasn't crying over what they did to me. I was crying because I'd stopped being ashamed. That afternoon, alone in the courtroom hallway after everyone left, I drifted toward the windows overlooking Chicago. Wind off Lake Michigan cooled my cheek. Michael was being escorted out by deputies. Samantha was crying quietly in front of reporters. Flashbulbs popped. I whispered, "You both thought you could bury me, but you only buried your lies." Later, I stood outside on steps of the courthouse. Press assembled. Nora Caldwell was there. Ethan, reporters. "Mrs. Hayes," asked one reporter, "how are you feeling?" "Relieved," I said, "but also stronger than I've ever been. Because the truth was always mine. I just had to find the courage to tell it." Courtroom lights faded behind me as the gavel struck. Even then, I felt its weight reach through Chicago's streets, across lawns I used to tend, through rooms where I once served dinner. Michael's shackled feet echoed. Samantha's collapse into her chair echoed more. Each thud was a reminder. I had survived. I had spoken. And justice, in a form I could barely have hoped, was beginning to happen. Outside, news crews clustered around the marble steps. Reporters pushed microphones toward my face, asking what this meant. My voice, trembling slightly, had grown firm through every trial, every testimony, every sleepless night. "This verdict," I said, "is more than about me. It's about everyone who silently thought they were powerless, who believed that age, illness, or dependence stripped them of value. Tonight, we remember that dignity belongs to all of us at 70, 80, or beyond." Over the next weeks, Thomas worked with prosecutors, ensuring the court's orders were upheld. Michael, sentenced to 2 years of incarceration and heavy restitution. Samantha, 3.5. Fines piled up, forced public apologies recorded, contracts voided. It was legal closure. But it needed to become something more. Through the foundation, I drafted a proposal with legal scholars and elder care specialists. It was called the Illinois Elder Rights Act, designed to strengthen protections for seniors, financial transparency in guardianships, criminal penalties for anyone attempting abuse or fraud, mandatory registrations of elder care blogs making medical claims, harsher oversight of power of attorney abuse. I testified at the state capitol, standing before committees, lawmakers, activists. I wore the emerald suit again, now a symbol not just of what I earned, but what I reclaimed. In those hearings, I spoke of trust, of betrayal, of the small cruelties whispered but never named. A senator asked, "Mrs. Hayes, is this about revenge?" I paused, looked her in the eye. "No," I said, "it's about prevention." So the next person who fears her dinner, her home, or her fate over something she didn't consent to won't have to wait for justice. Bills were introduced. Media coverage spiked again. Grassroots groups rallied. Seniors came forward to testify, some grateful to be heard, others scared, but all of us felt seen. Meanwhile, the foundation grew. We opened our second center in Springfield, partnerships with Chicago Legal Aid Services, training programs for social workers to recognize elder abuse early, workshops in churches, community centers, even senior homes, financial clinics on tax law, hotlines that were answered around the clock. We published a handbook, Your Rights, Your Voice, a senior's guide, distributed in libraries and doctor offices. Every day, letters arrived, not just notes of thanks, but stories of change. One letter from an 85-year-old man in Peoria. His son had been collecting his mail and hiding bills. After learning from our guide, he challenged it, got his money back, and reclaimed control of his life. One woman in Aurora told us her daughter-in-law had been spreading rumors about her memory loss to get access to her bank accounts. The handbook armed her. She held family meetings, recorded conversations, and preserved medical records. She won her case in local court. Back home, though, peace was a growing companion. Some mornings, I drink coffee on my balcony and watch Lake Michigan catch the sunrise. The wind lifts my hair, and I wear my pearl earrings because today, I want to remember I earned this place. I don't avoid mirrors anymore. I walk with my head high, unbroken. The photo of that family barbecue, the one Samantha insisted on taking. I've moved it from the drawer. It hangs in a spare room, not as a memory of love, but as proof of what I survived, proof of who I was, who I am. Legislation moved forward. The Illinois Elder Rights Act passed, signed into law by the governor. Courts required stricter evidence for claims of elder cognitive decline. Banks required additional verification before approving life insurance beneficiaries. Anyone managing a senior's digital presence had to disclose relationships and consent. Penalties for financial fraud against elderly persons increased. Daniel and Samantha served their sentences. Samantha's video apology, which once reeked of fake contrition, became part of public record. Michael's voice trembled in his apology recordings. He admitted blame. But in the soft moments of memory, I understood. I didn't need reconciliation to be whole. One evening, Nora Caldwell invited me back to television. She said, "You have redefined power for many. What do you do with it now?" I smiled, looking into the camera. I use it to protect others, to ensure no one else feels unseen, because strength is not always loud. Sometimes strength is standing, alone, and refusing to be silent ever again. I came to realize something essential. Vengeance fades, but justice endures. Pain may leave scars, but scars are proof we heal. And in healing, we become whole, not despite what was done to us, but because we refuse to let it define us. Once the courthouse doors closed behind the verdict, I knew a chapter of my life had ended, but another was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, I made small decisions just for joy, because surviving, even thriving, shouldn't always be about fighting. Sometimes it's about breathing. I booked my first trip in years to Door County, Wisconsin, a cottage perched just outside a small lakefront town. The cottage had white clapboard siding, flower boxes under the windows, and a porch swing that creaked in summer evenings. I woke to the call of loons each morning, sipped coffee out of a chipped mug, and walked barefoot along sandy shores, letting time wash over me. I brought with me a sketchbook. Drawing had always been a hobby I abandoned after my husband died, too expensive, too frivolous. But there, by the water, I tentatively sketch fish shapes, the curve of driftwood, the the silhouette of trees softened by mist. My hands, once trembling in fear, now steady at the edges of paper. Back in Chicago, my schedule filled with things I had once told myself I would get around to someday. I took painting classes at the Community Arts Center. Oil paint, vivid colors, deep blues, gold, olive. I painted cityscapes, sunsets, hands folding laundry, a memory. I wrote letters to old friends, those I had lost touch with when fear kept me silent. I reconnected with Ruth from my church, who once warned me of the rumors Samantha spread. We now meet weekly for tea at the church hall. We laugh about the small things. We remember the quiet strength we've carried for too long. The foundation continued, of course. But I found balance. I hired staff, so I wasn't always at every meeting. The legal team in Springfield took on more cases. My role shifted from fighter to mentor. People sometimes asked if all this pain made me bitter. I didn't try to hide that there were nights when sorrow creeped in. But no, the days were richer now, filled with color, with purpose, with love. Friends sent postcards from far-off places. I made a promise to myself, travel once a year. So next winter, I planned a trip to New Orleans. Mardi Gras lights, jazz by moonlight, gumbo and beignets. I imagined walking Bourbon Street with Paula or Ruth, laughing until the night stretched wide. I'm 71 now. I've learned I'm not too old for anything that makes my heart light. Not too old for new shoes, new colors, new dreams. In my penthouse, I've made a space for art. A small studio with easel, with brushes, with paint-splattered drop cloths. I have shelves of books I never got to read. I host dinners for people who see me, not pity me. Late at night, sometimes we listen to jazz records, share stories, watch the Chicago skyline glow. These moments remind me that while justice salvaged my dignity, joy rebuilds it. The most unexpected part. I've begun mentoring others, elder volunteers, survivors who find courage through the foundation. A young woman who wrote me from Phoenix, whose son had been draining her savings. A man in Detroit, abandoned in a facility no longer wanted. Through letters, video calls, workshops, I've helped them find their voices. Hearing them speak, seeing them reclaim life, it's a gift I never expected, but I cherish. I open my journal often. Today, I wrote something simple. Life isn't what happens to you. It's what you decide to do with what's been done to you. Because yes, I was hurt. I was betrayed. I was almost lost. But I decided I would not use my story to stay broken. I would use it to show others they don't have to be invisible. I sit now in my penthouse, a soft light spilling through the windows, dust motes floating like tiny stars in the calm air. A cup of tea in hand. No poison in this. I let myself reflect on how far I've come, on what was lost, what was gained, and what forgiveness truly means. The silence here is not empty. It's full of all the moments I thought I'd never get back. The early morning sun over Lake Michigan, the feel of paint on canvas, the sound of laughter in my living room. These aren't grand victories, they're small. But they are mine. Sometimes I think about Michael. Not with anger anymore, but with sorrow. I remember him as a child, the way his voice would crack when asking questions, the way he leaned into me when thunder rolled, the macaroni necklaces he'd present on Mother's Day. Those memories don't undo the betrayal, but they remind me of something essential. He was once innocent, once hopeful. Samantha, I think about her less often, but I remember what she said in court. I never meant for it to get this far. I don't believe her claim of regret yet. Perhaps she believes she was cornered by circumstances, but intention, I learned, isn't enough when actions inflict harm. Forgiveness, I now understand, is not about saying the harm didn't matter. It is about saying, I will no longer be defined by what they wanted to do to me. It doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean trusting again. It means choosing peace over perpetual rage. I forgive them, not because they deserve it, but so that I can stop being consumed by what they did, so that I can use my energy for building, for healing, for helping others. There was a letter sealed, from jail, from Michael. He wrote, I remember your stories. I remember your strength. I was always ashamed, but scared. Maybe I was always broken. I don't ask for absolution. I ask that you live well, Mom. That you keep being the thing I couldn't be. I read the words. I folded the letter. I didn't send a reply. Some words are too heavy to carry. Some wounds heal slowly. But they can heal. I think about justice. It came. The law upheld truth. Michael, Samantha paid for what they'd done legally, socially, morally. But justice is more than verdicts. It's about how a life continues afterward. So I walk forward knowing I carry both scars and pride. There are nights when grief visits when I miss the life I thought I'd have, before betrayal. But in morning light, I remind myself, survival was never enough. I have chosen more. I also think about those I've never met. The people who called our hotline, walked into our office, or shared their stories online. There is something miraculous in choosing to speak out when society says silence is your lot. If my journey gives one person the courage to step out of fear, the number of nights I lay awake is worth it. There is peace, but it's a choice. Every morning, I decide not to be bitter. I decide that my life will be not defined by what others tried to steal, but by what I choose to build. So here I am, 71 years old, with laughter and tears, memories and dreams. I may never fully erase what was done to me, but I will carry its lessons. That dignity is never conditional, that family is not always safe, that strength can be found even when shadows loom large. The first time I stood on the steps of the Eleanor Hayes Foundation's new headquarters, I felt the weight of everything behind me and everything ahead. A warm spring breeze brushed against my cheek as the crowd began to gather. Supporters, volunteers, reporters, and dozens of seniors who had found courage in my story. We were no longer invisible. 6 months had passed since the sentencing. The court had done its part. The justice system, though slow and imperfect, had acknowledged what so often remains in the shadows. That betrayal within families is still betrayal, and that elder abuse is not only real, it is a rising tide. But what happens after the storm is where the real rebuilding begins. The foundation had grown faster than I'd imagined. What started as a few phone calls and some seed money from my personal account had turned into a network of lawyers, counselors, and advocates. We had received grants, partnerships with local health clinics, and now we were opening our first physical center in Chicago, a place where no older adult would ever feel alone, helpless, or unheard again. As the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, I was introduced by a young woman named Amelia, an attorney in her 30s who had joined the foundation after reading about my case. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. When I first heard Margaret's story, I thought of my own grandmother. I thought of how easy it is to dismiss older voices. But Margaret didn't let silence win. She turned her pain into power. And today, because of her, hundreds of people are safer, wiser, and stronger. I stepped to the microphone, not with shaking hands, not with fear, but with clarity. "Thank you, Amelia," I began, my voice steady. 16 months ago, I was quietly planning how to survive in a house where I was no longer welcome. Today, I stand before you not just as a survivor, but as a woman who chose to fight for herself and for others. The crowd was quiet, a respectful hush. Then I continued. This building isn't just walls and windows. It's a promise that our elders are not disposable, that dignity doesn't have an expiration date, and that strength doesn't disappear with age, it deepens. The applause was long and sincere. After the ceremony, I walked the hallways. There were offices for legal aid, rooms for counseling, spaces for community meals, art classes, and storytelling circles. There was even a meditation garden in the back, an idea from Lauren, who had become like a sister to me. "I thought you might like a place just to breathe," she'd said with a wink. She was right. The garden had a bench inscribed with my favorite line. Still, she rose. In the months that followed, the foundation uncovered cases more shocking than mine. Seniors whose families had taken their homes, stolen pensions, lied to doctors, isolated them for years. Each time, our team stepped in not just to offer legal help, but to listen. Because sometimes, being heard is the first step toward healing. There was one afternoon I'll never forget. A woman in her late 60s named Teresa walked into our office with tears in her eyes. She clutched a worn photo of her son. "He's not evil," she said softly. "But he's cruel, and I don't know how to stop it." I sat with her for nearly 2 hours. I shared my story not as inspiration, but as truth. I told her that love doesn't excuse abuse, that hope isn't the same as denial, and when she left, she held her head higher than when she'd come in. That's when I understood something fully. This wasn't just about me anymore. Meanwhile, the media continued to call. There were documentaries, podcasts, and even a feature in a national magazine titled "The Rise of the Silent Army: How Seniors Are Reclaiming Their Voices." They included a full-page photo of me in the garden, smiling with sun on my shoulders. I didn't recognize that woman at first. But I grew into her. And yes, Michael wrote again. This time from prison. The handwriting was different, less shaky, more controlled. "Mom, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I've been attending therapy. I've been forced to sit with myself. I'm not writing to ask for anything, just to say that I was wrong. Deeply, devastatingly wrong. And I see it now." I still didn't reply, but I folded the letter gently and placed it in my drawer. Healing takes time. Some bridges are too burnt to cross again, but I let the letter exist for closure, maybe, or for a future where grace might one day find room again. One night, Lauren and I were having dinner, just the two of us, on the terrace, with jazz playing low in the background. She raised her glass of wine. "To Margaret," she said, smiling. "The woman who reminds the world that growing older isn't growing weaker, it's becoming more unstoppable." I laughed. "I'll drink to that." That night, as I climbed into bed, I whispered the same words I had for months. I am free. Not just from Michael and Samantha, not just from the lies, the fear, or the betrayal. I was free from the version of myself they tried to convince me I was. Weak, dependent, disposable. I had rewritten my story, and this chapter was mine alone. It had been nearly 2 years since I left that house, since I walked out in the middle of the night with nothing but my purse and the determination to live. I had built a new life, one of peace, purpose, and people who respected me. But there was one thing I had yet to do, something I hadn't been ready for until now. I decided to visit Michael. The prison was an hour outside the city. On the drive there, I kept my eyes fixed on the horizon, not wanting to give space in my heart for doubt or anger. This wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. The visiting room was gray and sterile. Metal chairs, plexiglass dividers, a faint smell of bleach. Michael entered, wearing the standard uniform. He looked smaller, not physically, but diminished, somehow. The weight of guilt, perhaps. Or reality. He saw me. For a second, his expression didn't change. Then his eyes filled with tears. He sat down slowly, his hands trembling on the table. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Hello, Michael." There was a long silence. "I didn't think you'd ever come," he said quietly. "I didn't think I would either." He nodded. "I deserved everything. The sentence. The public shame. The way you cut me out. I lost myself." "No, Michael. You didn't lose yourself. You chose who to become." He flinched, but then he nodded again. "You're right." He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I've been writing for a long time, trying to understand how I became the kind of man who could hurt his own mother." He slid the paper toward the glass. "I didn't reach for it. I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I don't deserve it. But I want to say this to your face. I'm sorry. For the manipulation, for the lies, for the way I let Samantha control everything, but also for the way I didn't stop her. I was weak, cowardly, and worst of all, I used your love as a weapon against you." He was crying now, silently. I watched his hands, how they curled in shame, how his fingers knotted together. I took a deep breath. "I appreciate your apology," I said slowly. "But forgiveness, that's not something you get just because you ask. It's something you earn through change." "I understand," he whispered. I looked at him a long time. "Do you still talk to Samantha?" He shook his head. "Not since sentencing. She blamed me for everything, said I dragged her into it. Her sentence was extended when they found more donation fraud under her name. So she learned nothing." "Seems that way." He looked up. "Do you ever think we could talk again? Someday?" "Maybe," I said. "If you continue to be honest with yourself, with others, and if you stop making excuses." He nodded. "I'll keep writing, even if you never read them." When the visit ended, I walked out of the prison lighter, not because he was forgiven, not because anything had been undone, but because I had said what needed saying. There were no more questions, no more what-ifs, only the life I had chosen and would continue to choose. That night, I stood on my terrace again. The city below sparkled like it always had, but something inside me had shifted. The past no longer held power, and the future? It belonged to me. I was standing in the garden of my foundation's new community center. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind where everything feels possible. Around me, volunteers were preparing for our first Independence Day for seniors, an annual celebration we had created to honor those who had taken back control of their lives. There were banners with messages like, "You are not a burden," and "Every story matters." Tables filled with food, music from the 60 seconds playing through old speakers, and laughter. So much laughter. I was exactly where I was meant to be. A woman in her late 60s approached me. She looked nervous. "Mrs. Vance," she said, "I just wanted to say thank you. Your story saved me. I was living with my son and his wife. It was a lot like yours. But one night, I saw your interview, and it gave me the courage to leave." I smiled gently and took her hand. "You saved yourself," I said. "All I did was remind you that you could." As the event continued, I gave a short speech. Just a few words from my heart. I once thought getting older meant becoming invisible, that your needs no longer mattered, that love had to be earned through sacrifice. But I was wrong. Age does not diminish our value. It reveals it. The audience clapped softly. Some cried. That night, as the celebration wound down and the last guests trickled out, I stood alone in the center of the garden. The string lights above glowed warm and golden. I thought of everything of the betrayal, the escape, the rebirth, of Michael, of Samantha, of the women like me who had been made to feel less than whole. And I made a promise that as long as I could speak, I would use my voice for those still finding theirs. Back upstairs, I made my tea, pulled my blanket over my lap, and opened the first chapter of the book I was writing. It began with one sentence. It was 2 a.m. when my world fell apart, and that was the beginning of everything. What did you feel while listening to this story all the way through? If it touched your heart, leave the #1 inch the comments. If you didn't feel connected to it, feel free to write 0. Every piece of feedback means a lot to me, because it's thanks to you that I can keep going. It's from your responses that I draw the energy to tell the next chapter a new story is coming, even deeper, even more moving. And I truly hope you'll be there to listen with me.